Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches, where today I'm going to be talking about the 1998 Hong Kong wuxia action fantasy film, The Storm Riders. And in this movie, the Wicked Lord Conker cares about only three things. First and foremost of these is power. So when he is given a prophecy that two young children named Wind and Cloud are key to growing that power, he begins a ruthless quest to find them. Wind proves to be the son of the Whispering Prince, a former rival whom Conker defeated but did not kill 2 years earlier. Conker doesn't intend to show much mercy this time, as he wants not just the prince's son, but also the man's famed sword, the Blizzard Blade. You see, Conker's second passion is his sword graveyard, a collection of the weapons of all of those people he has slain, and he wishes to add the blade to his inventory. In the event, Conker achieves only part of his aims. The Whispering Prince does die, but at the hands of a fire beast rather than Conker himself. The Blizzard Blade is lost in the process, though Conker does kidnap and adopt the young boy Wind. The second child, Cloud, is the son of a blacksmith who has just forged the ultimate sword, a potent weapon, but one that can only be wielded by those of his own bloodline. Conker's forces kill the smith and take the boy and the sword. Lord Conker adopts the boy and he puts the weapon in his sword graveyard. 10 years later, the two boys have grown into men with no memory of the fates of their real fathers. They're both highly skilled martial artists and generals in Lord Conker's armies and have helped him gain the power he so desires. They are also both in love with the third and final thing that the wicked warlord cares about, which is his daughter, Charity. So, everything seems to be going great for Lord Conker, but that prophecy that foretold his rise to dominance had a second part hidden in a puzzle box, and Lord Conker will learn that only when he finally solves the puzzle. Would it surprise you to learn that when he finally does accomplish that task, it is to read that the dragon is powerful, but will be stranded when wind and cloud become a storm? In other words, the same two people who have secured his power are now prophesied to be the ones to destroy it. Well, obviously, Lord Conker's not very keen about this idea, and he promptly sets out to destroy both wind and cloud. But in doing so, will he thwart destiny, or merely ensure it comes to pass? So, The Storm Riders is a feature film adaptation of a Hong Kong comic book series called Fung Wan, which began in 1989 and racked up an impressive 675 issues before finally coming to an end in 2015. The comic series ultimately had three main parts, and this film adapts the first half of the first of those three parts. A 2009 sequel, The Storm Warriors, which I may discuss in the future, subsequently adapted the second half of that first part. Now, upon release, The Storm Riders won a lot of praise and several awards, particularly for its technical elements, such as film editing, the score, and its sound design. The visual effects also garnered a lot of acclaim from the Hong Kong critics, though I think they're unlikely to impress modern Western audiences. For one thing, the film is now over 25 years old, and no CGI from that era stands up particularly well. But for another, Hong Kong budgets and resources are much lower than those of Hollywood films. The Storm Riders cost $11 million, which was less than 1/10 the budget of Roland Emmerich's Godzilla film of the same year. Now, I wasn't able to find good figures on the film's commercial success. Wikipedia indicates that Hong Kong ticket sales were about half the production cost, but presumably it recouped additional money from the worldwide box office, particularly in Asian markets. So personally, I quite liked The Storm Riders, but I don't think it's going to be to all tastes. So let's unpack the film a bit more to explain why. And the first thing that really needs to be underlined is that this is very much a fantasy wuxia film. You may be thinking, well, I've seen wuxia films like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or Once Upon a Time in China. I know what to expect. But despite the waifu action of those films, in which people run up walls and balance on the top of 100-foot tall stands of bamboo, they're much more grounded than this movie. Characters in The Storm Riders do things like astral projection and throwing fireballs, and far, far more than that. In one particularly memorable scene, a character rips off their own arm in order to fuel their magical martial arts powers. So basically, don't go into this expecting a historical or modern day martial arts film experience. Go into it expecting a baroque and sometimes gruesome superhero movie instead, because that's far more what you're going to get, right down to the characters having names that sound like they're out of a comic book. Lord Conker, the Whispering Prince, Sword Saint, and so on. I believe those names are more or less literal translations from the original Cantonese, where it's entirely possible they don't come off as quite so like superhero code names. Certainly, I think there's some cultural differences at play because a character name like Seedy Sword almost certainly has connotations in English that were not intended in the original text. Now, I have a fundamental aversion to the idea of destiny or predestination in the real world. If events are predetermined or fated to happen, then our choices and actions aren't just meaningless, they're not even our choices and actions. And clearly, our external forces significantly impact the options available to us. I was born white and male and middle class in an English-speaking country, and because of that, I've enjoyed opportunities that others did not and will not. But I also believe that we have control of the available options that we do take. And this is relevant because it's a key part of why I tend to be averse to the use of prophecy or destiny in fiction. Now, on some level, the events of a film or novel are obviously predestined in the sense that the characters are subject to the script, but I'm talking here not of that, but of predestination as an element of the story, something which the characters themselves are actively aware and consciously discussing. And probably I'm not the only one who feels this way. And on this front, the Storm Riders got a bit of a black mark from rewrite at the get-go, given that the whole main plot revolves around a prophecy made by a supporting character. The Scorpion King, which I spoke about last week, dealt with similar themes and threaded the needle by having all of the foretold events occur as predicted, but those events not mean what the prophetic character necessarily thought they did, which is the kind of use of prophecy that I can get behind. The Storm Riders, meanwhile, takes another tack that I can accept. While there is prophecy, and it does come true pretty much exactly as stated, the prophecy is revealed in a way that is calculated to prompt the very outcomes it predicts. In other words, perhaps none of this was predestined at all, and the characters did have the option to make other choices, and simply failed to do so. Although the outcome of the main plot is prophesied well in advance, however, it doesn't mean that the film is without surprises, particularly, I think, for Western viewers. For instance, while Wind and Cloud do ultimately triumph in the battle with Lord Conker, I don't think it's much of a spoiler to say that the good guys win, particularly when the script itself predicts it halfway through. The final form of their triumph is not in keeping with typical Western story beats. The roles and decisions of a number of secondary characters, and there are a lot of secondary characters because this is a very busy movie, are also different from what you might expect if, like me, your experience is largely with English language narratives. Ultimately, while this is not a film for everyone, it is also not without its attractions. Sonny Chiba is in fine scenery chewing bad guy form as the Wicked Lord Conker, for instance, and although the CGI visuals are rather dated, it is otherwise a visually opulent film with great costumes and several imaginatively staged fight scenes. You do have to meet the movie on its own terms, though, which is that it's a mythological Chinese superhero film. But hey, if mythological Chinese superhero movie sounds at all like a kind of thing you'd enjoy, you could do a lot worse than check this out. Just make sure you're seeing the version that's a little bit over 2 hours long, not the alternative PG-13 cut made for US release. That's nearly 40 minutes shorter and apparently makes the plot, which is convoluted to begin with, completely incomprehensible. So next time, it's Friday, July the 4th. I couldn't bring myself to sit through Independence Day for a second time, so instead I'm going to talk about a Rah-Rah America movie that I think is actually a fun kind of bad, the deliriously silly martial arts nonsense of American Ninja 2. But that is next time. Until then, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you've seen The Storm Riders, let me know what you thought of it.